Well, today I might return to the Tao Te Ching for inspiration for the Dharma talk. A real classic of antiquity and a text which I guess we're not quite sure when it was written, or even quite sure by whom. It's credited with Lao Tzu, but it's not really quite clear who that was. But the Tao Te Ching would certainly is certainly a pivotal text in informing the development of Chan, original Zen in China. And for myself, I find that it's just so um, beautifully relevant to our practice now, our Dharma practice. Interesting word, Dharma, right? We talk about Dharma. Translation of that word could be translated as law. Law in the sense of principle, an immutable law, the way things are law, right? So not Dharma as a set of rules to follow, not like the law in that sense, but rather that the the absolute law of reality, like the way things are irrefutably the way things are now. And then, but for each of us in our human life, we tend to be in a place of um, a a partial understanding of how things are right now, right? Of course, just on a global scale, how could we possibly take in all of the complexity of the world and this present reality? You know, Master Dogen, the Zen teacher, has in one of his writings, he's talking about the way, talking about reality, and he says, just look even at a square inch on the ground, whole worlds are there. And it's very true. It's if you do that. I mean, often I've done that sometimes at Yokoji at the Zen Center here. When you're in a national forest and you look on the ground, even like a square inch of ground, there's a lot going on. You know, there's a lot of detail and there's a lot of complexity, whether we look very small or whether we look very large. So this Dharma encompasses the wholeness of this reality and our awareness of this. Meditation, when we practice Dharma, we're practicing opening a lens to the awareness which is already alive and present. That deeper presence, that deeper sense of awareness, which is never asleep, but is always awake and aware, no matter what the present condition is. Even during sleep, awareness is functioning as sleep. Awareness is functioning. We oughtn't really to call it my awareness. In our sitting, we have that sense, of course, of me, I, self. And that's the one that needs some instructions for sitting, right? Whereas the way, Dharma, doesn't need any instruction. In fact, all instructions are extra noise to be discarded. But you and I we need a little instruction or a reminder of the guidelines of the guardrails for how to sit, because each other we have this deep impulse to add to our construction and commentary on the way on reality, what we think and feel about it, and our preferences and judgments therein. So to right just to the beginning of the Tao Te Ching, and I thought sometime I'd like to work through the whole book. So maybe we could do that. But I'm going to start at the beginning, and it says, "The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real." naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. So that's a wonderful opener to the Tao Te Ching. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. That is wonderful practical advice for our sitting meditation. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. So our desire in this case is our picking and choosing and preferring mind that we live with. So we enter into sitting practice, and often we can have judgment around our meditation or the present content, especially if we're feeling churned up, like the mind is busy or perturbed, concerned, worried about something that's going on or something that we feel like it needs our attention. But free from desire, you realize the mystery. Free from desire for things to be other than they are. Now that's easier said than done, right? If we're sort of in the I was in the desert recently with Yushin, and we stopped at so we went to Sunnylands, right? Not for the tour, but you know Sunnylands, and for those of you in the desert, so and maybe visitors to the desert, Sunnylands, guys, it's like the best kept secret in the desert, I think, because you can just go to a coffee shop and then sit out in just this like incredible garden, and you can see snow-capped San Jacinto and San Gorgonio, and you can see the planes coming in to land to Palm Springs, and there's a garden with like a fountain and water and some cacti, and we were having a coffee, and I was looking and I thought, wow, this is like actually perfect, relatively actually perfect, right? Often we recognize perfection when the conditions fit just right, right? And so we can recognize, and then we're without desire because the present condition satisfies us. But then, of course, and even in that moment, I had a voice that says, this will change. This will change in terms of the conditions, like the phone will ring, or I'll realize that the coffee that I poured, half of the grounds came through the French press. So a little dukkha is coming soon. But at that moment, just there's a notice of relative perfection, and we can have that when at many times during a single day, things will be just right on the level of conditions. But this free from desire is to recognize what is unconditioned or unconstructed. That's our gate in Zen meditation. So we don't look for the sky to be a certain color, the room to be a certain temperature, or the mind to have a certain quiet or its relationships of thought. But the key is to let go of preference that has nothing to do with relative conditions. And instead to then, it says, free from desire, you realize the mystery. Now that might sound like, well, we're going to find the secret meaning. Aha, like the kind of cosmic whodunit of enlightenment. I will realize the mystery. And yet, what we're talking about here is this mystery of being, the mystery of being alive and being and experiencing this now. This, right, which is the mystery of life unfolding in real time. Free from desire, you make real the mystery. So free from desire, rather than picking and choosing and distorting this experience, rather you make real this experience, and things are as they are. internally and externally. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. That's that wanting it to be different than it is. Now, we do that as human beings. I like to say that all of us as a human being, we're somewhere in attachment and aversion all the time, every day, wanting certain things to happen and not wanting other things to happen. And in the nature of being human, that is, there is no end to that, right? We're always in some way in attachment and aversion as we're encountering changing conditions. But if we're caught up in this wanting things to be different, and that's what's running us, we're living in a reactive way to that wanting things to be different, then we see only the manifestations, it says. You just see the problem. We see the problems, we see the things we want and the things that we don't want. Again, many people, we might spend our whole lives in this way, and in one sense that, well, things will continue to function. But when we're involved in a tussle with life in attachment and aversion, finding it difficult to accept reality or needing reality to conform to our conditioned worldview, then there tends to be more dukkha. There's more frustration and there's ultimately more suffering. The Tao Te Ching and Taoism as a whole really just gets to the point of pointing out the surrender and alignment to the way things are now, forever now. Just aligning with this as it is. Of course, the Taoist hermits in the mountains of China living a life of renunciation, maybe not so many distractions as a busy householder or a person living in the world with responsibilities and jobs and having to, so much content that we have to deal with. But, they had different challenges, and I'm sure it wasn't an easy life. I sort of jumped in at the middle here, so I'll come back to the start. The Tao, which is, again, this word Tao, the way of reality is another way to say that. The way things are, the Tao that can be told is not the Tao, is not the eternal Tao. Now, this is very consistent in Zen with Bodhidharma saying, where he says, Zen is a teaching outside of scripture, not depending on words and letters, pointing directly at the mind, realizing Buddha, realizing awakening, pointing directly at the mind, not depending on words and letters. So the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Another way to put that is the Tao that can be explained in words and understood intellectually is not the actual way. It's a description or a limited definition of the way. That's something to really bear in mind with Dharma talks or reading Dharma of those things, right? No matter how some people are very good with words and can elucidate really wonderfully and get close to it, but you never quite reach it with words. Again, look, I mentioned Master Dogen, the Zen teacher. He talked about word. He was a great, wonderful writer, but he said the closest way to reality through words is poetry. Right. So it's like poetry gets a little closer. Good songwriting gets a little closer in words, right? Words that can make you feel the experience that the person is trying to convey. But still, words are a limited way to describe. But in our present culture, there's a lot of stock put in words. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The name that cannot be named. Right. So, how if we try and define this experience or Dharma, or what awakening is, or what the Buddha realized, or our own realization, if it's something that's defined, no matter how skillfully arrived at, then it's limited. then because it's become a thing, anything that is defined as something, anything that is something is a form. Anything that is a form is subject to decay and impermanence. A way can only be found when emancipated from being a thing or a form. Right? So it's much better to look at this life or our life in this way as an unfolding process, as like life as an eternally just an unfolding process. This life has been unfolding since before the Lao Tzu of the Tao Te Ching, long before the Buddhists looking into time immemorial. How long has this reality been unfolding? Who's to say? Did it begin with the Big Bang? Well, what happened before that? You know, who knows? We soon get tied up in knots when we try to contemplate these things. I love Zen and the Tao in this sense because you don't need to you don't need to study a lot of formulas. You just need to put your backside on the ground or in a chair, sit still, and enter into the laboratory fully equipped in order to explore. Right? Zazen and meditation is like it's sitting in the laboratory of reality. Like, what is this? What is this? Not what I think it is or what I can describe, but the close experience. So if your nameable is the eternally real, naming is the origin of all particular things. So all particular things. Again, we have labels for everything, which is wonderful. I mean, it helps us navigate this wild reality that we're sharing. Right? We all have a name. And we need a name. We need a URL for the website. We called it Insight Community of the Desert. We use labels in order to navigate. But if we confuse the labels with something more than just being a label, then we mistake relative truth for absolute truth. The way in this sense, or what we're talking of absolute truth, is beyond naming. And again, we can look at that in a very practical experience in our meditation or in our life. We have a name, we have a history, we have relationships and family, a career, or whatever it is that we're involved in, and lots of labels. And we can use those labels. Those labels are meant to be useful. They help us to navigate, just like names on a map, like words on a map. We can look at a map and see where these towns and cities are, but they don't capture. They don't capture the actual place. They don't capture the label. Doesn't capture the experience. Same thing with this self that we're living this life. The name and the conditions and the commentary and those things that we live with, there is something much also deeper, a deeper presence that our life is unfolding within, that is deeper than the label, deeper than the name. And we can look at that and say, who are this old koan of who am I? What is this? Really, what is this? What's going on? Like who am I? If we take away those labels. Naming is the origin of all particular things, so we name forms in that way. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. And this is so if we talk about mystery and manifestations or formlessness and form, or in Zen, we'd say emptiness and form. It says here, it arises from the same source. So in Zen, and I'm sure you've heard me talk about in the Dharma talks, it's often in Zen, we talk about the absolute and the relative. A relative, a world of form and things and difference and high and low and opposites and all of the ways we categorize. That's our form. And then formlessness, emptiness, or the absolute. That's all of this at once. What before the name, before duality, before comparing this to that. That's not something usually we have difficulty because we run into that and it's just like, well, what the heck does that mean? Or that doesn't really make sense. Yeah, no, it has no meaning and it makes no sense. But it is. It's this. We're living in the midst of mystery. That makes no sense and has no meaning, but we can find. Right? So these manifestations are all playing out within a grand mystery. And what that means, it means we don't know. Ultimately, I think I shared once perhaps, but I always remember I was riding in the car when my son just turned 20. It's just like, where did that go? What happened? What is going on? He just turned 20 a couple of days ago. Just like yesterday, I remember driving in the car and he was sitting in the back seat and it's kind of and he's still in the booster, not in the little, the first seat, but when you graduate up to a booster. And he's in his, of course, when I grew up in Wales, we didn't even have car seats, never mind boosters or bother with a seatbelt mostly, just driving in front with let my dad drive in smoking a cigarette. That's how I grew up. But some things have improved over time, right? And I remember my son in the back, and he asked me the question. He said, what's the meaning of life?" Like literally asked that question. Like what is? And he was about 4 or 5, or something, maybe 4 or something like that. And and I remember, and I was, so this is what, 15, 16 years ago or something. And at that time, and I said, there's no meaning. And then I caught myself because I looked in the rear view mirror and I saw the look on his face and I thought, oh my gosh, he's going to be lying on a couch in his 30s explaining this to his therapist. And then my dad said, there's no meaning, just what a terrible, terrible thing to say. But it's true in one sense, and of course. But I looked and I thought that's the wrong answer for him, and I said, but we bring the meaning. We bring meaning. That's what we do. We bring meaning to life. And he sort of, I'm not sure how much of he took in. And I thought, okay, good save, Blackwell, right? And we let that one go. And then years later in my practice, so with pushing what I felt like was the edge of just sitting and shikantaza, I really arrived at a place of no meaning, but not in a wonderfully gratifying, it's no meaning, ride in the cloud sense, but more in a kind of a horrifying, no meaning, nihilistic, no meaning, walking around like I'm an alien on planet Earth sense. A little more like that. It's like they don't really put that in the books, in the Dharma book, but sometimes you pass through those gates. We do in our life where it's difficult and you doubt everything, right? At that time, I doubted everything around so-called Zen or Dharma, Tao, right? And it was enough that I could do to just keep my feet on the ground. I remember calling Yushin at one point. It's because I was giving a talk. A couple of times this had come up when I was talking, a Dharma talk or in a sit, and it was, I can't explain it, but the world had just collapsed, and it was like it's just no meaning anywhere. And it was just keep your, all right, there's a carpet here, just walk, it's all good. There's a door, just make it. And then from the ground up, very much the sense of what I had to make meaning out of it. I had to bring meaning to make any sense, to speak, okay, there's, it feels there's nothing at the bottom here, but there are people around me and this meal needs to be made. These dishes need to be put away, right? This bill needs to be paid. Everything that needs to be taken care of in my life. And I realized then there's meaning everywhere, all of the time. And we have the conduit of that place where meaning unfolds. Right? We don't have to find meaning outside of ourselves, but rather allow meaning to be expressed in the response of our lives. That's how, that we become the meaning. Mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. So we talk about this like form and emptiness, or in Taoist terms, sameness and difference. Right? So the emptiness or absolute is just sameness, things before they're undifferentiated. And then difference, which we don't have to really explain. We know that difference inside out. Sameness is what we really practice on the cushion to make it real. So you recognize the base present experience is where sameness is realized. This is as is, no separation. That's the practice on the cushion, and then the expression of a finding of that realization in activity. And yet, looking at it in this way, the sameness and difference or absolute relative, it's still provisional. Provisional in the sense of we can choose perspectives and move around with perspectives of how we look at reality. We do that in Dharma practice. We start off from a relative position where we feel separated, and we practice the other side of that to return to oneness, wholeness, non-separation, non-duality, whatever we call that. And it can feel, again, provisionally, like there's two perspectives. There's two ways going on. There's the everyday upside down view, and then there's the enlightened right side up Buddha view. But ultimately, as the Tao Te Ching points out, this arises from the same source. This is like there's no real split there. You can look at life this way, and you can look at it that way. You can experience difference, you experience wholeness. This is like a lens or a perspective as we're practicing or living in reality and living our life. But really, this is an integrated experience. It's not one, it's not two, it's not one or not two, which is something we never get our minds around, right? It's like Zen or Zen ultimately snatches away every position or perspective that you can try and hold on to. Right. So we're left in a kind of in a not knowing, not knowing, not relying on knowing, not relying on an understanding, not relying on a formula or a framework. And from that non-reliance, we rely on this. We rely on who we are now. We rely on the experience that we are, and we trust and have faith in this one that we are fully, and let go of the comparison, of a wishing for it to be different, of the comparing or wanting it to look another way, and rather really fully and wholly embrace the one that we are now. Now, it's hard to embrace the one that we are now on a relative level when conditions are terrible, right? And sometimes we have a nice, like I talked about Sunnyland, sometimes the conditions are relatively awesome, and it's easy to try to hold on to that, but it changes. The only thing that we can rely on is to not rely on anything at all, and rather just go straight ahead with our eyes and hearts and minds open, but from a place of confidence there that we can match and respond appropriately to whatever arises, over which we have no control over well, we have limited control over what arises. The source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. Right? Those lines are quite, it could be quite chilling depending on how we look at them. It's like the source is called darkness. There's a koan with Master Umon that says, everyone has their own light. Right? We all have the light of awareness. Everyone has the light of awareness. When you look for the light, you can't find it. The darkness is dark, dark. Right? So it's like everyone has this awareness. When you look for where this awareness comes from, what this mystery of reality springs from, where it arises from, you can't see it. We can't find it. You can't know it. You don't even get it. There's nothing to see. That's the miracle. That's the mystery. It's dark in the sense of you can't find it. You can't see it. Darkness within darkness. And that's like a kind of like, don't even try. It's not only dark, it's darkness wrapped in a blanket of darkness, buried in a well of deep darkness with a lid closed and all the lights turned off. Darkness. It's just give up. You will not find the bottom to this. And to realize that so wonderfully ironically is the gateway to understanding. Right? That not knowing is the gateway to understanding. It's so revolutionary in comparison to typical kind of Western philosophy or thought that trusts knowing to kind of unpack meaning. This rather is concerned with the gateway to understanding is to not obscure the lens of presence with knowing. What we know about this experience fogs the mirror, or can fog the mirror if we cling to it. So in our sitting, it's that way. As things come up in the mind, felt in the body, is experienced, just experience, experience, experience. Don't cling. Don't grasp. Don't try to push away. If we grasp or try to push away or disturb whatever is arising, then we fog the mirror. And we don't experience directly. So, for myself, it's like practice in one sense, very simple. Give a certain amount of time to exercising the muscle of present awareness, where I drop all opinion and construction and ideas and pursuing after thought and return to baseline sameness, don't differentiate reality. And then recognize that realization in the midst of everyday activity. Again, that's our practice, and that's what never ends. We're always practicing that. For myself, I had a busy week. Those kind of days where you work all day, and at the end of the day, you're like, I've got more to do now than what I began with. Every day was like that. I reached about 5 o'clock, and I'm like, I'm done, and I've got more to do than what I began with. Oh, it's so demoralizing. when life is like that way, it's like it's so demanding. Well, how important to have a place of refuge, right, where you don't have to book somewhere and go to the refuge where you can try and have the conditions be perfect. That's got its place too. I encourage you to book a day at the spa when possible, right? But the refuge, the unconditioned refuge, is always available. That is the way, that is the Tao. That is realization, the unconditioned refuge that you can find anytime, if we let the conditions drop, if we let our opinions fall, if we let our weighing and judging of reality rest, even for one breath, two breaths, we can return to that place of alignment. And from there, experience and taste something of equanimity, allowing things to be as they are. And I say this as a practitioner. I read when I read this, I'm like, okay, Jokai, um, make it real, actualize it, make it real. It's not enough to rest on any idea of understanding or attainment. That has to be thrown away, throw away, throw away. Okay, I would be delighted to open it up to hear something from you if you would like to share a comment or anything that you would like to add or ask or anything at all, please. All right, my friends. That's time flies, right? As no Zen teacher ever said ever, but I think it's true. Time time flies. We began at 4:30 and here we are at 6 o'clock, so or a little past. So I'll put it there. And thank you so much again.